This episode is brought to you by Blueprint Health. Blueprint Health is a measurement-based care platform for mental health providers. You can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprinthealth. And also this episode is brought to you by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com, the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers in private practice. They're who I use in my practice. Check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is episode number 197 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer. Glad you joined me. And if this is your first time listening in to the podcast or stumbling upon it, or however you've come here, glad you're here. And for those of you that are following us wherever you listen to your podcasts, glad you're back. I'm glad you're following us and with me on this journey. This particular episode, I think, is one of the most important topics that I've covered, and I'm really looking forward to you hearing from my guest today, Gabe Nelson. And I met Gabe back in August at the Podcast Movement Conference, and got to have a short conversation with Gabe there, and really knew that I needed to have him on the podcast because the things that he works on and the things that he does as a financial advisor are really important to us. And in particular, learning, figuring out how you're going to take care of the unexpected. I think for a lot of us over this past year, it kind of goes without saying we've been hit with a lot of unexpecteds. And, in my own life, and I've shared, I think, on some previous podcasts, I've been, working through my wife's disability. My wife is a breast cancer survivor, and she's had a brain tumor, and just has she's really quite the fighter, but she's disabled. And so we've just gone through a lot of ups and downs with her ability to just care for herself, and just having to get independent caregivers and all of that kind of thing at home. And fortunately, we were prepared for that, and that we had the wisdom several years ago to get a long-term care policy and that sort of thing. But also, I don't say this in a bragging way, but just really in a way, and maybe more of a way of being grateful or having some gratitude. I've planned for the unexpected along the way, and we've got things in place to be able to take care of stuff. So I hope that this episode is very thought-provoking for you. And if you haven't planned for the unexpected, now's the time to start. I mean, sooner better than later. And so I'm looking forward to you hearing from my conversation with Gabe Nelson, and just being able to think about this, maybe not so easy topic to think about, but it's an important piece for you to consider as a private practice owner, whether you are a solo practitioner or a group practice owner. All of the things that we talk about in this episode are things that we all need to be prepared for. So in just a moment, we'll get to Gabe. But one of the things a couple of things I wanted to let you know about before I get to my conversation with Gabe is we've got Killing It Camp coming up. And if you don't know about Killing It Camp, it is a conference that Joe Sanok started in 2019 in his group, and the Practice of the Practice. And Killing It Camp has really become, at least for me, one of the premier private practice conferences. And I'm really looking forward to you hearing more about that. A little bit about it in our next episode. I interviewed Joe again, but you can still get tickets. It's going to be a virtual conference again this year. We had originally planned for it to be live again in Estes Park, Colorado, and I'm really bummed that we're not going to be there, but we're really erring on the side of caution with just the rise of the COVID pandemic again, and we're just not out of the woods with that. So we're playing it safe. So anyway, you can find out more about that. It's going to be in October 15th and 16th, and then again in another session in November. So if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/KIC2021, you can find out more about Killing It Camp. And I'm going to be presenting in that conference, and I think it's going to be a good one. Got a lot of good people presenting and a lot of great experts, and a good way to kind of network and check in with folks. So anyway, be sure and check that out. Again, practiceoftherapy.com/KIC2021. And also wanted to remind you that I'm still in the pre-launch of the using Google Workspace as a practice platform course. And this is really an additional course to the Google Workspace for Therapists course, and that we really dive in deeper on how to use the tools in your practice as a platform. And I partnered with my friend Ed Dara, who has been using Google Workspace for years as his practice platform. And so he's got a lot of great insight into using a lot of different tools with that and just things to think about. And so I'm really pleased with how it's coming together. 75% of the content is up there, but during this pre-launch, you can get early bird pricing and get a very significant discount on the full course. And also, I want to mention that when you enroll in the course, you've got lifetime access. And so as I add to the course, as I make improvements to it, you'll always have access to it. And it's going to be well over 6 hours of instruction on using the different tools and giving you a way to think about the systems and processes you use within your practice and how you can use Google Workspace to make those work for you. So be sure and check it out. practiceoftherapy.com/GWS platform. And again, just a few more weeks, it's going to be at the early bird pricing, and then we're going to switch to the full pricing. As a matter of fact, today, as I'm recording this intro, I'm going to be working on the course today and getting some more content up there. But like I said, it's between 75 and 80% up there already. So take advantage of that early bird pricing. practiceoftherapy.com/GWS platform. And be sure and check that out. And before we get to my conversation with Gabe, I'd love for you to take a listen to our sponsors. One thing I'll say real quickly before we get to them, our sponsorships and TherapyNotes.com and Blueprint Health make this podcast available to you, or make it possible for me to continue to put this content out there and provide some quality resources. So take a minute to listen to these words from our sponsors, TherapyNotes and Blueprint Health. As your practice grows, the systems and processes you have in place will keep your practice running smoothly. That's why it's important to have an electronic health record system that is specific to mental health providers. TherapyNotes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance, all right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. They're who I use in my practice. And did I mention that they are one of the top-rated EHRs for mental health providers? Their support is also second to none. So be sure to check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And be sure to use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. That's therapynotes.com. And this episode is also brought to you by Blueprint Health. One of the best ways to serve clients in your practice is through measurement-based outcomes. In fact, more and more third-party payers, aka insurance companies, are demanding measurable outcomes. And with more and more emphasis on good mental health, having a way to measure your outcomes just makes sense. Introducing Blueprint, the measurement-based care platform that administers, scores, and charts hundreds of symptom rating scales to give clinicians deeper insights into treatment progress. Ultimately, by helping behavioral health providers to grow top-line practice revenue, increase clinician satisfaction, and deliver more effective care. So be sure and check them out by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprinthealth. And by going to that URL, you can also get your first month free. Again, that's practiceoftherapy.com/blueprinthealth. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm so excited for you all to get to hear from Gabe Nelson. Gabe was a person I met at the Podcast Movement conference back in, I'm losing track
first week
of
of
time.
August.
Yes.
Yeah, first week of August.
So, Gabe, welcome. Glad you're here. As I start with everyone on the podcast, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your story and, as I like to say, how you've landed where you've landed?
Well, like you said, we met at Podcast Movement. I started a podcast called Solopreneur Money, April 15th of 2020. So right in the middle of the pandemic. And the reason I did is because I had all kinds of extra time because I wasn't following my daughters all over the country with soccer and dance and my one that's in college. And that's how we ended up meeting. But to back up a little bit more, I'm a practicing financial advisor. I own a company called Gabe Nelson Financial Incorporated. I thank the marketing people for that tremendously creative name, but I'm an independent financial advisor. I specialize in helping solopreneurs master their finances so they can create the life that they want. And that encompasses all kinds of stuff with financial planning and financial advice that we'll get into a couple of those things in a bit. But I live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I've been married for 26 years to my wife, Melissa. We've got 3 daughters, a 21-year-old, 17, soon to be 18, and a 15-year-old. So I got senior, sophomore. And awesome. It's been really a great life so far. So I really can't complain.
Yeah, that's, I was reminiscing the other morning just about with the kind of the football season starting back up. My daughter was in the band. And so it's an exciting time. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, one of the things that after Gabe and I met that, I started, kind of looking at his stuff and listening to some of his podcast episodes and that sort of thing. And one of the things that a topic that I've never really broached much here on this podcast, although I've hit around it because people hear from me all the time, the importance of knowing your numbers and understanding the financial side of running a business and running a practice. And it's nothing, and that kind of information is nothing that we as mental health providers in this particular niche really cover in graduate school or any of our training. And so it's real important to learn that, particularly, as we all know, it's, running a practice is running a business. But one of the things that's been on my radar screen here lately, and I've shared with some of the listeners that my wife is disabled and she's had some pretty significant health issues here lately, and we're kind of going through this transitional period. But the importance of having kind of a backup plan, but also if God forbid something were to happen to me, what would happen to my practice? What would happen to just our financial situation? And I know that, Gabe, you had an episode about that. I'd love for you to tell again the story that you did in that particular episode on your podcast, but maybe just talk some more about that.
Oh, definitely. Well, really what we're talking about is we're talking about preparing for emergencies or preparing for the worst thing that could possibly happen. And so what I'm going to do is I'll talk about some of the things and then I'll bring that story in. And the story was a story of Lloyd and Elaine. And so I'll hold on that just a little bit. But the idea of protecting yourself from emergencies as a practicing therapist, whether you're running a group practice or whether you're running a solo practice, there's certain things that you need to start thinking about and putting into place, like making sure that you got an adequate amount of emergency reserves set aside. I mean, do you have 3 months, 6 months, 12 months of reserves set aside so that if something does happen to your practice and you're not able to keep working or seeing your clients? I mean, the pandemic was a fantastic test run for a lot of people. But the beautiful thing about your guys' business and my business is you can still take care of your clients virtually. You can still do a lot of your practice through telemedicine, where most of my clients now are starting to be willing to visit via Zoom. They're like, we really don't need to come see you now. We're able to do it like this. And so the first thing that I would tell people in order to prepare yourself for those, what I would call those emergencies and those setbacks, is start thinking about setting aside a certain amount of money in your practice for the emergency reserves, whether it's going to be 3 months, whether it's going to be 6 months or 12 months. And what I tell my clients that are what I would call solopreneurs, which would be, really focused on your solo practitioners, is get 6 to 12 months set aside so that if something happens, you are going to be okay for a while. Because the big thing is as a solo practitioner, that business checkbook is kind of like your personal checkbook. You shouldn't have it that way. But a lot of people have a tendency to go, my business is doing well, so I'm going to be okay on the personal side. So make sure you start thinking about that. So that's step one. Step number two would be to then start making sure that you've got some adequate insurance in place to protect you from those types of things that could happen. Now, no one ever likes to talk about insurance. I mean, no one wants to talk about life insurance. They don't like to talk about disability insurance. And they don't even like to talk about, wills and trusts and things like that. But these are all of the things that you need to start thinking about when you are an adult business person and you're running a practice. And so, the first thing that I would say is make sure that you've got an adequate amount of life insurance in place. You had said, in that introduction, is that your wife is disabled and you're wondering, okay, what's going to happen if something happens to me? And so that being said, the first thing is that we're going to worry about is, all right, well, what if you get hit by a bus? All right. And there's things that you need to have in place to make sure that if you did get hit by a bus, what is in place? So the first thing I would say is you need to make sure you've got an adequate amount of life insurance in place. So I would say 5 to 10 times. I'm a huge fan of just straight term life insurance. Keep it simple, get as much coverage as you can for least amount of price. So 5 to 10 times your annual income. Or if you want to get really technical, sit down and think about, all right, how much money is it going to take to make sure that my wife is going to be okay, or my family, whatever your situation is, and make sure they're going to be okay for X number of years, that things are taken care of. So that would be the step one that I would do. A lot of us have life insurance. Very few have the adequate amount. So that would be the first thing I would say. You get hit by a bus. But then there's this other thing called a business that you have. All right. So whether you're a solo practitioner or whether you are a group practitioner, what is going to happen to your business in the event that you do get hit by a bus? Do you have another therapist in place that is set, or a firm that is set and ready to buy your practice from you so that you can realize all of those years of hard work you put together to benefit your family? And so the investment advisory world over the last 10 years has really gotten big into that, because they realize the amount of trust and the relationships that we build with our clients as financial advisors. They started coming back to us saying, you have to have a succession agreement in place. And so here a few years ago, I went and found another firm in my town that is 10 times the size of my firm. So I knew they would have no problem writing a check to my wife, Melissa, if something ever happened to me. And I created a succession agreement with them. And it just gives them the first option to buy my practice from my spouse and my family in the event that I become disabled or I die.
Right.
And So that's a piece of protection that most solopreneurs don't think about. Then that brings us to what I would call just some business owner protection. I mean, what if you have a fire? The tragic events that have been going on down in the South with the hurricane that came through.
Right.
I mean, what if your practice was flooded? I mean, do you have some of those protections in place that would at least give you some replacement of income, or at least replace the computers that you've been using and the software, not the software, but the furniture, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes down to the other one. And the other one that was the story of Lloyd and Elaine, is making sure that you got some adequate disability income insurance in place to protect you in the event that you're no longer able to practice because of a major health event.
Right.
And that leads me to my story. So, all right. So the story is this. It's Friday afternoon. I'm just starting to get cooking supper. And about 5:00, I get and by the way, I'm one of these weird guys that absolutely loves to cook. So I cook all the meals in our house. I'm like the cook. And so at 4:30, 5:00 every day, I walk upstairs. My office is in my house. I start cooking supper, and we're going along, and I get a phone call, and we'll just call the phone call. We'll call them Lloyd and Elaine. And that's my fictitious characters from my, the name changes I made from my podcast. And Lloyd calls me, and I could just tell this guy never calls me on a Friday afternoon. And every time he calls me, he's jovial. He's kind of having fun. I mean, we just have a great relationship. And the first words out of his mouth are, Elaine's got cancer. Mm-hmm. I'm like, whoa. I mean, it was just a gut punch.
Right.
So I walked out of my kitchen into my 4-season room, and I'm like, okay, well, tell me more. And he says, well, it's this kind of cancer. And he says, look it up. He said, Google it. And he said it more like this. Elaine's got cancer. It's not good. Google it. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, I'm on the phone with you. Help me understand. He says, well, let's put it this way. He goes, I think she's going to lose her arm. He goes, it's in her arm. She's probably going to have to lose her arm. I don't know what's going to happen. Are we going to be okay? Mm-hmm. Well, coincidentally, we had just had our review meeting about 2-3 weeks prior. I knew they were going to be okay. And I just basically said to him, I said, well, here's the deal. I know you're going to be okay. Tomorrow morning, I'll go out into my office. I'll pull up your files. I'll look back over my notes. I'll give you a quick phone call just to let you know. And I basically did that. I called him the next morning. I said, hey, by the way, you guys are going to be just fine regardless. If Elaine doesn't make it, which is not really fun to talk about, but if she doesn't make it, I know you're going to be okay. But if in fact she does lose her arm, you guys have a fantastic disability income policy in place. And I didn't sell her the disability income policy. I have helped my clients get disability income insurance over the years. They actually had it before they came to me as their advisor. And I said, keep that thing in place. Don't ever mess with it. It's a great policy. So basically, they now had the peace of mind that they were going to be okay. And so 2-3 weeks go by, and I get another phone call, and they're like, we're going to Mayo Clinic. Now, Mayo Clinic, anybody in the country knows about Mayo Clinic. It is where, when either A, you really want that second opinion, or B, you don't like the first answer, so you're going to get another one. So they go to Mayo Clinic, and they have a visit at the Mayo Clinic, and they do confirm that they think she's probably going to lose her arm. And so they call me on their way home, and we're on the telephone, and they're very, very concerned. They're worried that she's going to lose her arm. She's going to be alive. The phone call went like this. Well, we know this. Elaine's going to be alive, but she's going to lose her arm. I'm like, okay. Well, I know the disability income policy is going to kick in, so your income is going to be fine. They're like, how do we even go about doing this? I said, don't worry. I said, I've got the contract. I will call the insurance company. I will get you to an attorney. We'll get everything dialed in that needs to be done. See, what I haven't told you yet, though, is she's in the medical profession. She has to use both arms on a daily basis to do what she does. So she would be disabled. She would not be able to use it. And so when I had told him, I said, don't worry, just I'll call the insurance company. We'll get the ball rolling. It's going to be fine on that. Just focus on your health. And so they just had just kind of like this peace of mind to come through on that car ride. Like, okay, we know you're going to take care of this. We got this taken care of. We'll move forward. So a few more weeks go by, and then I'll finish this story. A few more weeks go by, and so one of their friends from their community was just not happy about the fact that she was going to have her arm amputated to basically stay alive. And she's like, you know what? We're a pretty, well-off family. Let's go find you another second opinion. So they literally went and hopped on an airplane, and they went to St. Louis and found a doctor who had already been dealing with this with other patients. And they did a treatment protocol that actually allowed her to A, save her arm, B, get back to work, C, stay alive, which she was just absolutely thrilled with.
Yeah.
And so the happy ending is she's back at work. She's doing great. She's in remission. Everything is fine. Constant worry that it's going to come back. But the idea that they had that protection in place, they had adequate life insurance in place so that if she did pass away as a result of this, him and his family was going to be fine.
Right.
Had she did need to lose her arm, her income was going to continue. She was going to be fine. And the neatest thing about this is, and I say this in the podcast, Elaine's spirit was, all right, when I get this thing done, I'm either going into management, I'm going to go teach, I'm going to go do something. This isn't going to break me. Right. And that was probably my favorite part of the whole story was she's like, this isn't going to break me.
Yeah. I love that story. And, Gabe's podcast, by the way, is the Solopreneur podcast. And so I would commend that to everyone to listen to that because he's got some other great, stories and that sort of thing. One of the things I'd like to share as well in just thinking about not only disability insurance, which, again, it's a coincidence because I hadn't met Gabe before I did this, but I recently added disability insurance for my practice. And part of it was just knowing what I had experienced with my wife. She had been in similar, she was in banking and was a trust officer for banks and that sort of thing. And so we kind of knew. And the other thing I'd put out there for folks, Gabe, is particularly if the younger you are, the sooner it is to start with this is a long-term care policy. That is something that has been a lifesaver for my wife in terms of her care. She requires, we have two independent caregivers that come in and help her. And fortunately, we had the foresight to buy a long-term care policy that covers that. And so, if you think about what it would cost to have somebody come in and help in the home and that kind of thing, it can be pretty devastating if you're not prepared. So the sooner, the better with all of this is what I would say. So I love that story, Gabe. Thanks for that. So to switch gears a little bit, you're getting ready to have a book to come out. And so I'd love for you to tell folks about that.
Yeah, I have a book, and that book is going to be launched and available January 11th, 2022. So I'm a little early on it, but the book is called The Solopreneurs Money Manifesto. And it is really a how-to guide on how to master your finances and create the life that you want. And so the book is all about pretty much everything that I've done for the last 26 years as an advisor and helping people. It's stories intertwined in with teaching you how to take the concepts that I work with my clients every day and basically say, all right, what kind of life do you really want to live? And we have an exercise in there called a life wheel for you to analyze. And I even put my own life wheel in there for you to analyze your life, like not just the money, but your life. Like, are you being a good parent? Are you being a good spouse? Are you living where you want to live? Are you doing the things you want to do with your life? And the whole idea is to get an understanding of what you really want your life to be. And then teach you how to have your money support that life. And then for all of you solopreneurs and even the group practitioners, how to have that business support your life rather than the life supporting your business, because we all want to have a great life.
Right. I love that. And I can't wait for that book to come out, because that is, you're kind of on my bandwagon with all of that. One of the things that people hear from me all the time is you've got to start with why, and really understand, and you're absolutely right. Your business should support your lifestyle and what you want for yourself in your life, not the other way around, because that's where people get burned out. They get in the ditches, so to speak, with their business and with their practices, is because they're doing all this stuff, but it's not really what they want, and it doesn't fit their lifestyle.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what the book is written to do. And it's really just a nice little simple how-to guide. It's not overly technical. I leave that for when we actually help people, is to get technical. But what I've learned over like I said, the 26 years I've been doing this, the more simple we can make it, the easier it is for you to put into place and to take the ball and run.
Right. Well, Gabe, I love this. And I know we could have probably a day-long conversation about all of this stuff, but I want to be respectful of your time. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you. And by the way, another plug for Gabe here. He's got some great sources on his website, but tell folks how they can get in touch with you.
The best thing is, if you want to hear my podcast, it is Solopreneur Money is what the podcast is called. You can get it anywhere in your podcasts. The best way to find me is go to my website, GabeNelsonFinancial.com. If you hit /resources, it's where all of the tools that I've created and checklists of everything from, how to determine the value of your time, to hiring people, to even a nice little checklist I created that if you're really thinking about bringing your spouse into your business or vice versa, how to make sure it's really going to work and how it's going to be right. I got a fun story to tell on another day. If you ever have me back on the podcast, I'll tell you that story of how that checklist came about.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
GabeNelsonFinancial.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Gabe Nelson. And I also have a little bit of a presence on Instagram as well. But the best thing is just go to my website, GabeNelsonFinancial.com, or my podcast, because then you just get to hear these stories and you're going to learn while you're listening. And that is Solopreneur Money.
Awesome. And we'll have links, of course, in the show notes and the show summary for everyone. And Gabe, I can tell you already, we're going to have you back. So I'm looking forward to another conversation just about these important topics and just helping people be prepared and also just enjoy what they're doing. Well, again, I'm so grateful to Gabe for being on the podcast and really taking part in this conversation about some really important stuff, just being able to prepare for the unexpected and being able to think ahead about that and be proactive with that. It's so important. One of the things to think about, if something were to happen to you, God forbid something were to happen to you tomorrow, how would your family go on? How would your practice go on? And how would it affect your clients? So I know recently there was one of our colleagues in the area died unexpectedly, and it's really been quite a sad situation. And I think, fortunately, he was part of a group practice, and so some people were able to pick up kind of where he left off. But it also, I know that we were able to pick up some of those clients as well. And it affects the clients when there's something that happens to someone. So be thinking about, if you were to become disabled, if you were to, God forbid, die, what would your succession plan be? What would you be? Who would know how to fill in and take over? Or if you if you were to become disabled and no longer able to see clients for some reason, what's your plan for that? Not only, being able to take care of your clients, but also the financial impact of that. So think about those things. It's not necessarily fun stuff to think about, but it's something that needs to be on our radar. So again, thanks to Gabe, and you can be sure and find more information about Gabe Nelson and his company in the show notes here with the links. Also, be sure and check out our sponsors for today's podcast, TherapyNotes, practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. And also check out Blueprint Health. Blueprint Health provides measurement-based processes and software for you to be able to truly be evidence-based in your practice, and it will help you a great deal in being able to be more effective as a therapist. So be sure and check them out as well. practiceoftherapy.com/blueprint health. So again, folks, thanks for joining me for the podcast. I'm glad you're with me on this journey. I'm looking forward to some upcoming episodes. It's hard to believe episode 200 is coming up. Here we are at 197. That's just almost impossible for me to believe that I've been doing it this long, but I'm so glad you're with me. Be sure and take time to follow us wherever you might be listening to the podcast. Used to be subscribed, but now it's follow. So glad you're with me, and be sure and leave us a rating and leave us a review that just will help other people find us. And also be sure and go to practiceoftherapy.com to find out about all the other resources I've got there. A lot of free stuff there, and also just other links to other great private practice consultants and learning about all the different services that are out there for those of us in private practice. So take care, folks, and hope you have a great rest of your week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.